We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back on this edition of Illinois Rising with Hilary Gowins, managing editor of Illinois Policy, the Illinois Policy Institute, illinoispolicy.org. And joining us now, two guests we have in studio. One is Fred Long. He's the Vice President of Development and Government Affairs at UCAN. And Brian Walker is a UCAN board member. And UCAN is a Chicago-based nonprofit that serves 10,000 at-risk children, youth, families across Illinois via more than 30 programs annually. And gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. This is a poignant topic, a salient topic because of the state of affairs with funding of social services in Illinois, but also because of Illinois' job climate. There was a study that was just released a month ago, Economic Policy Institute, which is actually a left-leaning think tank. Illinois, in the fourth quarter of last year, was the worst state in the nation for black employment, 13% black unemployment in the state of Illinois. And obviously, as you go down age demographics, the numbers get even worse. So, Fred, why don't we start with you, since you're on the programmatic side. You're dealing with trying to help people on a daily basis. Explain kind of some of the challenges and maybe why, from your perspective, the challenges are more pronounced in places like Chicago and Illinois than perhaps in other states.
Well, thanks for having me first. I really feel good being here. One of the things that we look at UCAN is we're founded in the church, so through the St. Paul's Church of United Church of Christ. So we were we evolved out of an orphanage back in 1869 during the Civil War. The church made a covenant to the community that the kids would be taken care of once, parents went off to, fight in the war or never came back. So our roots started in child welfare, being able to provide services to young people who didn't have parents or who didn't have supervision. So throughout the years, obviously over 150 years, we evolved to being more than the traditional child welfare orphanage, if you will. And so how we were able to sustain ourselves is we had to kind of look at innovative ways of reaching out beyond our child welfare scope. And part of that led us into more community-based programming, which when you go into communities in Chicago that are underserved and underprivileged, the education and poverty, all of these kind of the symptomologies of what we see now as it relates to jobs and things like that really led us to start to delve into this work of working with young people in communities that aren't traditionally of DCFS or Department of Human Services. And so one of the things that we've seen going into the communities is that they're all different. Some of them have some of the same symptoms in terms of unemployment, education, incarcerations, and all of that, the rate. And so it really led us to kind of really rethink and take what we've learned in child welfare and apply that to a different demographic. Some of the same templates, but it's really a different population that we had to really look at and serve.
So Fred, UCAN is based in North Lawndale. That's a tough area of the city where there are a lot of really, really hyper-focused joblessness issues, crime issues, violence issues. Crime and violence is up, jobs are down. So what kind of help do you give kids who are facing these kinds of struggles in the city?
Well, one of the things that we're working on now is constructing a $40 million campus, our headquarters and a program service center in the North Lawndale community, which you just explained some of the profile of that community. And one of the things that we're trying to do, when we were going into the community, a lot of folks didn't want us there because, we were seen as a child welfare agency, as this, if you will, that's juvenile, delinquent detention. You're going to be bringing young people
to problems,
to an environment that's already ridiculed with an amir of problems. So one of the things we had to do is make sure that we had to re-communicate who we are and what we did. And part of that was really talking to the community, saying that we understand the need of young people and helping them to transition from their current status into providing jobs, educational endeavors and treatment around trauma and all of those things. And once we began to communicate that to the community, people really seeing us as a beacon of hope for some of the joblessness that was going on. So one of the things that we're currently involved in is funding through the city and the county level to provide summer jobs for young people. Last year in 2015, we provided over 425 youth jobs. And so that was through One Summer Chicago, one of the mayor's initiatives, and then also what they call One Summer Chicago Plus is a very similar initiative that we're the provider and subcontract through the city and the county to provide jobs for young people during the summer months.
And I know Brian Walker, board member here with us, is one of those guys who can write the $40 million checks to build your community centers. We'll get to Brian in a second. But you're also a kind of a success story that you're trying to pay forward to create other success stories. I think you were born in Elk Grove Gardens, right?
Yes.
And so you didn't have the fortunate son upbringing. So tell us a little bit about your story and kind of how it relates to the work that you and others who did go on to be successful in life, how you're trying to pay that forward.
Well, my father was a Vietnam veteran, and my mother was a parent of 9 children. So I have 8 siblings, and we grew up in Elk Grove Gardens, which is one of the first community project entities in the country, and it was really constructed for veterans who were coming home from the Vietnam War for housing purposes. And back in the early 1980s, when crack cocaine hit the streets, it really ravaged a lot of communities, and our communities were one, and my family, particularly my parents, were they kind of fell into that whirlwind of drugs, which led us into the child welfare system, particularly DCFS. So I was taken from my mother. She lost custody of her kids, all of us, and my grandmother took us in a community that was a little north of Elk Grove Gardens, but had some of the same symptoms in terms of violence and crack, in Roseland, which we know Roseland is it used to be a very predominant neighborhood. It was, if we think about Gately and the Pullman Porters.
Yeah.
So I went to Georgia and Pullman School when I was in the system, and so at the age of 10, I went into the system, and my grandmother took custody of all of us, which was very fortunate, and it was really unheard of at the time. And you guys may read about these things or see it in movies and things like that. When kids go into a foster care system, 2 kids go to Midlothian, 2 kids go to some families in Chicago, and we never see siblings again until we're older, if we're lucky. So I had the luxury of still being in the family setting, although I was in a child welfare system technically. And so at the age of 21, the state of Illinois, the legislature says that at the age of 21, all kids in the system have, to leave the system. Their terminology is emancipation. And I emancipated at the age of 21. After that, I got an internship at the agency of UCAN, which was formerly known as ULIC at the time. And they were looking at, as kids exited the system, they were leaving out some, or a large percentage, were leaving out uneducated and unemployed. And so UCAN thought, beyond what the state means are, how can we provide for this population as they're leaving us? And they created an internship program that I participated in and spent probably 14 years, was hired full-time, and I've been there probably about 14 years. And so I've come through various levels of work.
So what happens to kids who have similar experiences if they don't get to find access to a job somehow? What happens to these kids?
Because of the trauma that they've experienced, sometimes it's a longer road for them. Not everybody gets the chance to have an internship or have a caring adult in their lives once they enter into these systems, and it's hard for them to create relationships, meaningful relationships with folks that they're just coming into grips with. So, then if I just met you, it'll be hard for me, growing up in care, you probably could have my best interest, but it would be hard for me to trust you.
Right.
As a young person, because I had been let down by adults. So we see that a lot. So there's a lot of relationship issues, a lot of attachment issues. We have what we call a clinical philosophy at UCAN that talks about attachment and all of these things that you have to really look at from a clinician perspective in terms of helping people move from one spot to the other.
We're talking to Fred Long and Brian Walker from UCAN. When we come back, I want to delve a little bit deeper into maybe some of these root causes that UCAN tries to treat at the symptomatic level and what we can do at the root cause level. we will discuss on this edition of Illinois Rising. Dan Proft, Hilary Gowins from Illinois Policy Institute, back after this.